Hello, this is Mike at GameFromScratch, and welcome to This Week in Game Development. This is week 36-ish for the week ending July the 28th-ish. Now, if you're a regular follower of this channel, you probably know I missed last weekend, and that was actually on purpose. Now, the thing is, and I apologize in advance for this, but I'm going away tomorrow, actually, for a week in Mexico. So I wanted to try and get as much in as possible from the previous couple weeks, and then when I get back, I should be able to do a recap of the week in between. This probably means there will be no videos for the next week, and I want to actually apologize right up front. This summer has been pretty low output, so if you notice there hasn't been a ton happening on this channel, don't worry. Once we get back to September, frankly, and my daughter's back in school, we'll start seeing a lot more videos. But for the next week, it's just going to be pretty quiet around here because I am going to hopefully be falling down drunk somewhere on a beach in Mexico. So that is why this is a little bit late and why you're probably not going to hear a lot from me next week. So anyways, back to the prime story, and today we are looking at what happened the last week and a half in the world of game development. And the reason why I actually stretched this out a little bit is because last week, not a whole lot happened. But this week we had a bit of a pickup. Not as much as I expected, but there's something going on called SIGGRAPH. And SIGGRAPH is a graphics industry, mostly for CG guys. It's their annual event. It's been going on for 20 plus years. It's a huge event in the world of computer graphics. And normally there's a bunch of announcements attached to it, but as we're gonna see, there actually wasn't that much, which I'm a little disappointed by. But don't worry, there is enough news in this week to make this somewhat worthwhile to listen to. Now, as always, there is going to be a link down below with all of these stories we're gonna cover. So if you want more details, just jump into that and you can get them after the fact. So don't worry if I lose you at some point, not a big deal. Stories are linked down below. Click that, learn more. All right, so first off, we're going to cover off Unity 5.3.6 was released. Now, you don't pay a lot of attention to this one and further Unity news because you will find out at the very end something else. But it was pretty much a standard patch, not a whole lot going on there. Now let's jump forward a little bit. Another Unity announcement this week, and this one is actually quite cool, sort of, is Unity took a small step towards full C# support. Now what I mean by that is they implemented the newest Mono compiler. Now it's still using an ancient, like we're talking 7 or 8 years out of date version of C# as its base language because it's not compatible with Unity, but it is the current compiler at least. So it's one step towards actually supporting C# 6. As opposed to C# 2.x. So we're making small baby steps here, but they've definitely made a step there. So they're using the most current version of the compiler, just an old version of the language. And this is a migratory thing that eventually they're going to have the most current version of the language as well. Now this is all made possible because of the fact that Xamarin was bought by Microsoft. Now Xamarin are the people that made Mono that Unity originally licensed it from. And some licensing squabble kind of left them back in the Stone Ages for the supported version. So this is a good sign. Eventually we should see a version of C# that is not ancient. And a lot of really cool things happened to the C# world since, well, 7 years ago. So this is something I really look forward to seeing happen. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there because they've got divergent technologies they're supporting. They've also got IL to CPP, and that's intermediate language to CPP. Now, all .NET languages compile down to something called IL, or intermediate language. Basically, it's sort of like a bytecode or a machine code that runs on the .NET platform. So it's just one level above machine code per se. And IL to CPP basically converts that code over to C++, which is then compiled natively for each platform. And that compiler itself is also built around the old version of C#. So weird to see where that diverging support levels go. But again, this is a nice thing to see, and let's continue on. Another Unity news, actually Unity is going to really dominate the news this week, but it is a pretty important game engine, so I guess that makes sense. But when they announced their pricing changes, one of the major things they did was basically, actually when they announced their non-BS pricing changes. So first off, they announced their pricing changes, and the world went, what, huh, really? And then they came up with a new batch of them. And in the new batch, basically they said that the free version is new revenue limits and nice and going. And then there was the indie version, which was like 35 bucks a month. And that one, now you have the ability to customize the splash screen. Whereas in the Pro, the splash screen is completely optional. Well, that tool to customize the splash screen is now kind of available. It's in a preview edition, but the splash screen tool is available here. And this is going to allow you to basically make your own custom made with Unity logo if you're using the personal tier, or if you're using the Pro tier and for some reason you still want to have Unity on your splash screen when your game starts up. Now, another announcement this week was Kronos Group. Now, Kronos Group is the people, originally they were the people behind OpenGL. And since then, the umbrella of what they're concerned with has grown a great deal. They now have OpenAL, which is an audio library, Open VG or CV for computer vision. They got Open CV, which is a computing something or other. The acronyms are all blending together to me. But basically, they're the people behind OpenGL and its successor, Vulcan. And what they've just done is released Vulcan HPP, which is a set of C++ style header-only bindings for the API. Now, the Vulcan API is entirely C-based. So what they've done is created a header-only again, so there's no overhead or cost to this, but a header-only API binding over top of it. So it's got C++ isms in there, which include type-safe enums, improvements to the bit flags, close automatic string conversions, alternative initialization of structs, and then other enhancements and exceptions and return types. So if you're working with C++ as opposed to C, the Vulcan HPP library should make your world a little bit better. Another release this week, and this wasn't technically news, or it was news, but I didn't actually cover it as news. Instead, I actually looked at it a couple days after it was released and went, wow, this is really cool. Basically, there was a program called Raylib 1.5 release. Now, Raylib is a framework for C++ developers aimed at beginners. And I've heard that before many times. And this is one of the only times I've seen that they got it right. Now, it's not actually C++, it's C. It's C89 technically, which is 100% compatible with C++. So you can use it with that language. But the nice thing is it's also highly portable for being pure C. So I mean, it's making bindings to it with other languages is very easy. Porting it to other platforms is very easy. And right off the hop, this guy supports Android, Raspberry Pi, HTML5, and the Oculus Rift. And the reason why it supports only those platforms per se is because those are the ones that the author can support. So being portable, it should be portable to just about any platform you want it to be. Now, the cool thing about this guy is it is entirely all about beginners, and they've done a damn good job of this. So I recommend, if you want to start with C++, I've never actually recommended starting with C++. I think it's a bad idea, and I sort of still do, to be honest. But Raylib makes it so much better. So if you want to start game programming and you want to use C++, check out Raylib. It has a turnkey installer if you're on Windows, comes with an editor, Notepad++, a complete tool chain, the MingW compiler suite, and of course pre-configured. So basically all you do is open a .c project and run it, and it works. It's a very cool project. Here you can see some sample code. And you'll notice I've actually done a video on it called a C++ library that's perfect for beginners. And there's no hyperbole there. So if you want to learn the C++, check out Raylib. It's a very cool library. And I've covered it in some detail. I've also got a text post about it. So do check this link down below if you're interested in learning more. Another game engine released this week was the BDX game engine. This is one of those ones I've had my eye on for a long time. In fact, I checked it out a while back, an early version of it right here, both in video and text form. And what this guy is a very cool project. Basically, it is a mashup of libgdx and Blender. So basically, your game development environment becomes Blender. You can set and create scenes in Blender. You can use physics objects and properties, etc. in Blender. But your code is Java-based and built on top of the libgdx libraries. Now, they've extended them. They've added a bunch of game engine-y stuff because, keep in mind, libgdx is not technically a game engine. It's a game framework. And there is a good distinction there. It does not provide, basically, the stuff that BDX does. So what it does is it turns Blender into basically your level editor. And it does a very, very cool job of it. So this is the 1.25 release. Part of it that we saw in this release is we've got render to texture being supported. Game actors can now be invisible on select cameras. Texture loading and texture switching is now supported. A new mesh class has been added. Fog and mist is now supported. So those are the things that are directly in Blender that you can use. So you can set the fog or the mist values in Blender and they will automatically work in your game, for example. This is a cool project to set out. If you're somebody that's working in Blender or libgdx, I highly recommend you check out the BDX project. Now, another game engine release this week was, and this one came courtesy of SIGGRAPH, Autodesk released Stingray 1.4 and Maya LT 2017. Now, Stingray I actually did a review of. If you check my channel, you can find it there. It is their data-oriented game engine. They bought it from, I want to call them Fat Shark, but I might be screwing that up. It might be BitShark or Fat Shark, one of those two. Basically, this developer made this really tight, C++ powered, very light, Lua powered game engine. And it's data oriented in its composition. It's a very streamlined engine. Well, Autodesk bought it increased the support for their native tools such as Maya, 3D Studios Max, etc., and released it as Stingray. Now, this release is mostly all about the VR. We saw a bunch of VR-related things. So VR capabilities, enhanced connectivity with Maya LT, improved VR platform compatibility with the Oculus Rift and Steam VR, which is so basically the Rift VR headsets and the HTC Vive headsets there. Flow scripting support for Vive. Unique Stingray support for WebGL 2, which is sort of an up-and-coming feature, which is a cool thing to see, etc. Now, another thing they did at the same time was released a 2017 version of Maya LT. Now, Maya LT is a stripped-down version of their Maya CG application that's aimed at indie game developers. Now, there are some limitations to it that are beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about here. This guy saw an update to the UI. Shape authoring tools added new improvements for the VR, for the viewport performance, etc., and etc. So it's not a huge release of Maya LT, but definitely an update. Now, that's one of those things you're going to see is we're seeing more continuous releases, especially as we've moved to these subscription models. So it doesn't have the massive annual releases like we used to see because we're getting features iteratively as we go. So, this is the new norm. Don't expect to see a massive collection of new features every time there's a new point release. That's just, a historical thing at this point, to be honest. Ooh, Shockwave just crashed. All right, so next up we've got Algorithmic announced the Substance Suite free for students and more. Now, the cool thing is the Substance Suite is awesome. I actually did a video on Substance Painter. It's linked right here if you want to learn more. But basically, Substance Painter and Substance Designer are PBR, are physically based rendering models. So basically, you use it, the Substance Designer you use to recreate real-world materials, and Substance Painter you use to draw those materials on basically as textures. It is the preeminent texture. I think it's safe to say it's the preeminent texturing package right now. Of course, there are others. There's DDO, there's 3D Coat, Blender sort of has this functionality built in, etc. But Algorithmic seems to be winning this whole thing. And what they've done is basically made Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and Substance B2M, which is bitmap to material, I believe, are now free for students for personal use. So that's kind of cool. If you're a student, you're not, making money off your project, you can now use Substance packages completely for free. Another announcement they made here was the Substance Live is going to ship with, in their words, a massive amount of high-quality content at no additional cost. Now, Substance Live is their subscription model. Their subscription way of buying Substance Painter and Substance Designer. And now you're going to get a huge, basically, catalog of materials that you can now use with it as part of your $20 a month subscription. So that's kind of a cool announcement there. Substance Academy was announced with basically training materials and scan workflow capturing. It's kind of a non-announcement, to be honest, but basically they're working on 3D scanning technology at their end. Another announcement this week was Unity patch 5.3.6 P1. Now, you saw earlier on 5.3.6 was released. Here we've seen 5.3.6 P1. So basically, it's just the next step. What we saw there was the Oculus Rift 1.6 SDK bump and a bunch of fixes. And we will move on because this is kind of a note-dated piece of news, as you will see in a second. Man, when Flash crashes, it crashes across the board. Now we got Marmalade platform 8.5 was released and updated the 2D editor, which is kind of a cool thing. Now Marmalade is a C++ powered. It used to be very mobile focused, but now they've moved into whole kinds of platforms. So you've got smart TVs, Nintendo Wii, etc. So basically, a whole bunch of platforms are supported here. It was a lot of the early smartphones that weren't specifically, Android or iOS were also supported, and now not supported anymore. But Marmalade is one of those things that, if it's out there, it's supported for. It's a very low-level API for the most part, but there's also a set of Lua bindings on top of it. So they've taken their, C++ library, their tooling, their I believe they called it Quick, which was their Qt bindings built on top of Marmalade, and they built it together as the Marmalade platform. Now, this release, the biggest thing we saw here is support for OpenAL, support for Windows Live Tiles, and an update to the 2D kit. Now, the 2D kit is what you see right here, which is a 2D game editor. Very cool thing. It's something I'm going to check out at some point in the future. Major facelift overhaul to it in this particular release. So that's one of those things I will look at in more detail. Let me know if you're interested in it, but here are the updates they've made to it. Things like dockable panels, context menus, 9-slice texture setup, improved player interface, resource interface, object inspectors, etc. So pretty major release here from the Marmalade team. Now next up we saw, one more crash. why all these Unity announcements are pretty much pointless. So back here we saw 5.36. Now we saw 5.36 P1, and ignore both of those because they went ahead and released Unity 5.4. This was today, actually. And 5.4, Unity 5.4, actually wasn't a ton there. Remember the IL to CPP I talked about earlier, that thing that allows you to compile intermediate language .NET code over to C++? Well, they just added Android platform support for that compiler. Of course, there's also experimental C# support in here for the newest compiler that we mentioned earlier on. As is the way of things, I think there's better VR support in this guy, the better multi-threaded GPU rendering, GPU instinct, texture arrays, compute shaders. And one thing I'm excited to see, sort of, because I'm on Windows, I'm sort of excited to see because it's not here yet, but they added Retina support. So you now have high DPI support on Mac platforms. The Windows high DPI support is in the pipeline. So that is good to see because Unity is ugly as sin on a high DPI monitor. So that's definitely a nice thing to see. Now again, we're not going to see these earth-shattering releases anymore because everything is, on weekly or monthly release schedules, not on annual schedules. But 5.4 is a pretty nice little release here. And that was it. That was basically the world of game development for the week ending July the 28th. Again, I normally do these on the weekend, so I apologize for that. And I'm going to be a little late on doing the follow-up one because, as I said, I shall be in Mexico. You can tune into GameFromScratch, though. I will be updating stories this week, so I will be keeping up with the news and events of the world. I am bringing a laptop with me, but I'm not bringing a recording setup, so unfortunately there will be no new videos. And one last time, let me apologize for the low output I've had during the summer here. It will pick up once, again, my daughter's back in school, and I do have more time. One of those things, I don't think you want to hear videos with her screaming in the background, and that's what we would get. So we're not having a lot of videos this summer, and we will definitely see a pickup there. So if things seem a little slow here, that's why. But I hope you still enjoy what we've got here. And if you enjoyed this video, do please click like. And if you are interested in game development, this is a channel that's normally full of this stuff. Normally much more full, but don't worry, it will be full again. And we've got tutorials, we've got reviews, and of course we've got weekly news recaps. So if this is the kind of thing you like, please do click subscribe. I'd love to hear it from you. And see you all next week. See you when I get back from vacation. Hope you have a good one. See you later. Goodbye.